Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged.
Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. Hey, Glenys, how's it going?
Hey, Aaron. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm in the midst of
You're a world traveler.
Listen, not world traveler, like, let's say continental United States. But yes, I feel like the airports are getting to know me, and every time a flight is not delayed at this point, I'm sort of saying a hallelujah. Because two of my flights out of 2 out of 4, 2 out of 5 have been delayed for like long periods of time, and it's really annoying. But
Oy.
Yeah. But you know, I'm surviving, and thankfully, all the flights have been uneventful, but the trips have been really great. So I've been to IDEP. I didn't speak there, but Palm Springs. And then a little bit after that, I went through Texas and was in Dallas, Austin, and Houston. Got to meet some really amazing folks. Each of those communities it's really amazing to see how strong the eating disorder community is there, and how many hazy folks showed up to all of the different talks. I got to see Dr. Linda Bacon speak. I got to see my friend Andrew Wallen in Houston also. So it was a really great trip. And then I just went up to Seattle and spoke at the Puget Sound IADEP about trauma and binge eating disorder, which was awesome. And another really strong group of folks showed up there to hear me speak, and a lot of West Wing fans. So I got to chat about the West Wing and go deep into the West Wing with some folks. So that's always fun too.
And when you start your talk, do you do it sort of like a rock concert? You're like, the crowd's like, and you're like, hello, Seattle.
So in Puget Sound, I was speaking with a colleague from Center for Discovery, Dawn Delgado, and she is always like, can we have like music playing when we get introduced? And I'm always like so shy, but I think it would be hilarious. And I always ask people what their walk-up music would be. Yeah. So in baseball, walk-up music is when the batter comes up to plate, now batting, number 7, Aaron Flores. They play some music while you walk up to the plate. What would your music be?
Did you decide?
Well, it would probably be something from Metallica. There's an opening sequence in the song for Whom the Bell Tolls that I just really love. It's like this awesome bass little riff that goes off, and I would probably come out to that. But I would be like so hyped, I probably couldn't focus. Like I would want to hear the whole song.
Yeah, you'd be like, keep playing.
Keep playing it. Yeah, I don't know why you stopped.
Do something? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well. What would your walk-up song be?
This is really a good question, and I'm going to have to give it some thought. But I will tell you that I do live with a musician, the person who created our theme song, actually. And he once created a theme song for me. So I would probably use that one.
Really?
Yeah, we should just play it sometime. Yeah, it's pretty funky.
Yes. Are there lyrics?
Not fixed ones, anyway. He might make up some every time I walk into the room if it's playing. Yeah.
Oh my God. I think we should put lyrics to that.
Well, I think that the song is called Borborygmus. And and what that means is like those weird sounds your intestines make. And I feel a little worried that he's named a song after me called Borborygmus. Like, this song is named for you, the sound that your intestines make when they're digesting. Our household is
All right.
ridiculous. I've
it's not
told
the full-
everybody too much information already.
Go the full Oyston on us. I think that's what it should be
full
called.
Oyston. Yeah.
The full Oyston.
That's right. We have that is the name for a lot of things, like when you eat too much and you have to undo your pants and unzip your pants. That's something my dad does. So it's called the full Oyston. So yeah. Sorry, Dad. He doesn't listen. It's fine.
Well, I think, we'll have to maybe like end credits, like put in your theme song and listener contest, put some lyrics to that sucker.
Okay. Yeah.
And maybe we'll add some lyrics. So and I've said this before, every time I go and speak at one of these places, always there's a handful of people who come up and say, I listened to the show and thank you for doing this. And so I'm really appreciative of all those people who do come up and introduce themselves. And they always ask, where's
And
Glenys?
you say, she's in my
Glenys?
pocket. Hold on. And you grab out
Yeah.
like my little action figure. It's me,
Yeah, there
actually,
you go.
because I'm so short.
So I really do. I think one day we're going to have to do like a Dietitians Unplugged tour and just do a bunch of live events. And I think it would be so much fun. So because people, as much as they love seeing me, they always ask for you.
Yeah. And the same thing happens when they see me. I don't leave the home, so they never see me. But when they do, they're like, where's Aaron? I'm like, yes, I often think that myself. Where is Aaron? Where in the United States is Aaron right now?
Yeah, I stand out though. I'm not going to wear that stuff that hides me, like Waldo.
No.
I'm just out there.
Yeah. So when we do our speaking gig together, you're going to have your Metallica song playing. I'm going to have my Borborygmus song playing. Yeah.
There you go. I think it would be great.
I cannot believe I've just revealed all of that. But anyway, there it is. Enjoy.
No regrets.
What are we talking about today?
Oh, today's a good one. I pushed for this episode as soon as this event happened in our lives. I was like, Glenys, this is totally a podcast episode. And I've been like on Facebook many times, like ready to like hit the live button to just start ranting about this. But I'm like, no, I'm waiting because this is good content for the show. And I'm going to share it here.
You can do a rant after it's like the intro for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah. No, when this goes live, I'm going live and
I was like, oh, I got to let this marinate because it happened. It's something that kind of happened to both of us ish, like during a talk that we did give. And it was probably because we didn't have our theme music playing that they had a hard time with it. But yeah, I had to let it marinate because it was like, ooh, I got to sit back and think a little bit about what I feel about all of this. So yeah.
Yeah. So without further ado, right, we're going to talk about thin privilege. And in order to know why we're talking about it, it's important to understand how we got here. So here's the backstory. Glenys and I, for the past few years, have really been fortunate enough to be able to present a talk on health at every size and intuitive eating to a group of dietetic interns in the Southern California area. So our former internship director at the VA invited us to do this talk. And again, we've been doing it for a few years together now. And the talk is to, I would say, 50 to 60 future RDs. They're all currently in their internship programs in the LA area. So like that's like Cal State Northridge, Long Beach State, Children's Hospital, on and on and
internship,
on.
Our internship that we both went through. Yeah.
Yeah, our former internship,
and
exactly.
Also, I just want to add that you and I have both been in this place before because we both did our internships here in Southern California, and we were in this consortium.
Yep.
So we've been sitting where they have been sitting before.
Right. And again, further context, all these interns are coming together every Monday. They're not in their rotations. They all come together on one Monday every week, or I guess it's every Monday. And they do like a day of learning. So it's really a day of lectures. And this day is really focused on eating disorders and like that's the context of the day. So someone spoke right before us, but we were on at like 11 and we went all the way till 1 or something. And again, a talk about health at every size and intuitive eating. And each year, just like any talk, people give feedback, right? So they give evaluations that they submit to to Colleen Ross, who's the internship director for the VA, who invites us each year, and then Colleen sends us that information in a Word document. And I would say over the past few years, we sort of get very similar feedback. We get feedback like, I'm wondering if there's more research on this area to really solidify my sort of understanding. Maybe we could get more practice on how to apply this with patients. So there is some healthy skepticism, which we always embrace, and we always sort of look at how can we do this talk better. This year was a little bit different. Same but different. We got still some of those comments, but we had, I would say, I'm looking at the feedback form right now. I would say we got about 6 or 7 people who called us out because during the talk, let's pause. During our talk, we spend a lot of time talking not just about health at every size and intuitive eating, but we talk about weight stigma and why diets don't work and people's pursuit of diets. And in that conversation, we talk about privilege and we talk about what it is like for someone with thin privilege to work with someone who's in a larger body and how to sort of embrace that and talk about it and make sure that it is a point of discussion for them in the room with their clients. That being said, we got a lot of feedback this year saying, quote, "I don't like being called thin privileged." We had other comments that say, "I don't appreciate being called thin privileged. I thought it was offensive and had nothing to do with the presentation. I wish people would stay away from labeling other people. And I know we live in a society that likes to put labels on everything, but my comments is very unprofessional and uncalled for. I felt like he was skinny shaming."
Right. And I don't even remember how you brought it up, but I think you just brought it up as a concept. You didn't look at anybody and say, you all have thin privilege, because that's not something you would do. Do you remember how it came up or what you said during the talk?
Yeah, I mean, not specifically, but I know that in many talks when I bring up thin privilege, I just talk about the acknowledging that, in the room, that it might be important to help people feel safe in the room and comfortable with conversations around these things, is that clinicians who are in smaller bodies might want to consider looking at their own thin privilege. And whether that's acknowledging it with other clients, but acknowledging that they're navigating the world in a different way with a different set of standards that someone who lives in a larger body might be navigating the world, and that they're not going to be able to, they might not experience, actually they for sure will not experience a lot of the things that someone in a larger body does experience, maybe even on a daily basis, just because of their thin privilege. And I just knowing how I talk about this stuff, I'm almost positive it came up in that way, in that sort of context. Yeah, that's very
familiar. And you did not at any point look at this room of dietetic interns who had, there's body diversity within this group, right? So you did not at any point look at them all and say, you all have thin privilege. But people took it so personally. And it was a group of one set of interns from one place. We don't know where. So it's all anonymous. So we don't know where the feedback comes from. But it was interesting that it was a group that was sort of together. So I wonder if they sort of sat and talked about it and said, F these two people with their thin privilege, skinny shaming comments. I don't know. I'm imagining the worst, I guess. But it was the way the comments came in and were tallied. It was obvious they all came from one group of people. So yeah, it was like reading that. Now, also, can I just say we did get a lot of really good comments that were like very positive. And in fact, most of our comments were overwhelmingly positive and like appreciative of, even if somebody didn't agree with us, it's like, oh, I appreciate this point of view. Thank you for giving the presentation, kind of thing. But it was very interesting. vitriol of the negative comments. It wasn't just here's something you could do better, which is really good constructive criticism that we need, but it was like, how dare you bring up the topic of thin privilege?
Yeah. And so I think from my perspective, there was something that initially that really landed hard was this idea of not being professional. And that comment, was really impactful because that is something I think I take a lot of pride in when I do this work, is that I am professional, and, that might look different because of how I might show up and do this work. But I feel like that comment really cut sort of deep into like who I think I am as a dietitian in this community. So that one was hurtful. I mean, it really just it did hurt. The other stuff, though, as I sort of sat with it, I was like, I thought a couple things. One is how it made me feel like it's good to bring these topics up to people who had never heard them before. And this is sometimes the reaction you are probably going to get when people are feeling discomfort and challenged in something like that. But also, it also illustrated to me what it is like in a microcosm, right? What it's like for our profession as a whole, and how much work there is to do within our profession as dietetics to get other folks on board with this type of message. And to see it in people who are going to be soon to be dietitians really sort of made me realize, wow, there's a lot of folks out here in our community, in our profession, who still might feel very uncomfortable with this topic.
So maybe we should talk about a little bit what we mean when we say thin privilege.
Sure.
So number one, we're not thin shaming. We're not saying that a thin body is the wrong body to have. We are very adamant that all bodies are good bodies. So it's in no way, there's no way you could consider just even the concept of thin privilege as skinny shaming. What we're talking about is a systemic privilege that is granted or bestowed upon bodies that conform with, idealized, sort of the ideal beauty standards that are out there, the arbitrary ideal beauty standards that are set up by the same society. Right? So. Yes.
Yeah.
So
perfectly said.
Okay, good. I was like, and maybe I should ramble on for another 5 minutes about that. No. Okay, good. It's a framework, right? For looking at how there's this hierarchy of bodies, and some of them are not. Some of the, it's sort of like, this is how I describe it. Like, and I've been both. I've been thin, which it's kind of funny because I never thought of myself as thin, but I have been small and in the quote unquote normal BMI range. And I was like that for a long time. And I had been fat before that. And now I'm fat again. So I've had this experience of having thin privilege. And it's true that maybe I did not understand that I had it at the time. However, I did know that I didn't want to be fat again when I was thin. Now, why is that? Because I remember what it was like to be treated as a fat person. And that was, I have a body that is meant to be fixed somehow with dieting, or people looking at me as, you're not quite as good as the other bodies. So, in terms of like romantic relationships, I felt that when I was young and fat, that my thin friends would get a lot of attention and boyfriends and whatever. And I was sort of the leftover chopped liver. So that's a part of the privilege, right? Knowing that, like, that's why people fear being fat in this society, because thin privilege is a real thing. We do have a higher status when we're thinner, and I felt it.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I think what we're alluding to is that this is the nature of weight stigma, and weight stigma shows up everywhere. And like you, Glenys, I have I had thin privilege for quite some time. I don't anymore. And what's really interesting is when, for my experience was, I totally noticed, I didn't have a language for it, but I noticed for sure that in many ways my life was easier in a smaller body. And what I mean by that is it was easier, like you said, to like go on a date. It was easier to like go by myself and eat out. It was easier to navigate like getting on a plane and traveling somewhere. It was easier to have relationships with my family because I was getting praise for having a body that fit a more acceptable representation of what it should be. And I see it even now, being in a larger body and navigating this world, all those other things that I mentioned are there, but I also see the praise that people like just even like secondarily get for changing their bodies, right? So when I'm sitting next to someone and, and it's like a friend and someone comes up to that other friend and goes, "Hey, it looks like you wow, you look so different. It looks like you lost weight." And they start having this whole weight loss discussion right next to me. I noticed that, right? And like no one comes up to me and says, "Oh, hey, Aaron, it looks like your body changed. It looks like you might've gained weight." Right? "Oh, you look so good." Right? No one comments on no one says that,
Right.
And I also notice it like navigating just different spaces and noticing like who else in this room is in a larger body? Like who else sort of looks like me? Who else is sort of looks like me? I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Right. And who
I
else
notice
is not getting the privilege? Because let's hang out, right? Like,
right.
Oh God, let's be in this together, right?
Yeah. And so this idea of thin privilege, I think it is really for someone who has it and maybe has never lost it or never, been challenged with it. It might be something really hard to understand. But I think this is why I think each of us are drawn to this work, is because there is this social justice component to it. And we look at, we see privilege in all different sorts of aspects of the society, and just adding the body size to it might be challenging for some folks, but it is for sure a thing. And weight stigma is real. It has a very real negative impact on people's lives, emotionally and physically. And until we really include this into the conversation, I don't think we get to the true healing of being in our bodies. And so for future RDs, the reason we are intentional in doing this talk and including this language into our talk is because it is a discussion that needs to be had. It is a consciousness that we need to include in our work. And it's really important. And without it, I think we miss so much of the equation.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that when we're talking about thin privilege, we're not saying that a person in a thin body doesn't have any problems or that they have a perfect life. That this is,
Absolutely.
And in fact, I see it more as a useful concept of like, let's understand like body oppression, right? Like, let's understand why people in larger bodies want to lose weight so badly. At least that's one of the reasons, right? That there is a certain amount of privilege conferred on having a smaller body. And that's the privilege that they're hoping to attain, because we want, like, privileges, we want it, right? We want everybody to have the same privilege. So I think that maybe when people hear thin privilege, they're almost thinking, one, you're telling me I have something I don't deserve. So it's like, they clench up and sort of like, "Oh, no, I'm shutting down. I don't want you to tell me about that." But, maybe there's also a little bit of like, somebody wants to take my privilege away. Now, what I am hoping for is that everybody gets lifted up and has the same amount of privilege. We lift the people that don't have the privilege up to the level that, that we all have good privilege, But it doesn't mean we're trying to take other people down. And I'm wondering if that's a perception.
Maybe, I think that's a great point. And I think you're right. We're for liberation of all bodies, and really this trying to understand that all bodies are judged for sure. What I notice and I've noticed in just my own personal work in this area within the Health at Every Size community and the social justice lens is, aside from my body size, I navigate the world with a tremendous amount of privilege. I'm white, I'm cisgendered, I live in a upper middle class neighborhood. My kids go to a Jewish private school. I have a lot of privilege in this world. And when I first started sort of being confronted with that, I had a very similar sort of visceral reaction to be very defensive and to say like, but that's not me. Like, that's not, you're talking about race and you're talking about things but that's not me. And what I noticed is, and what people told me, is like, listen, when you are pulling back and you're like wanting to almost like put your hand over your ears, right? And do that sort of thing like that 2-year-olds do and go like, la, 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 I'm not going to hear this, is that's probably a time where you need to notice that this is actually when I need to do the most listening, right? This is the time where I really need to like take the hands off my ears, really sit with the discomfort of this conversation, because when you do have privilege, right, you sort of have the choice about when I can engage in this and when I can't. Someone who doesn't have that privilege, whether it's race, body size, gender, sexual orientation, all these things, they don't have a choice in the matter. They're always going to be marginalized in that way. So for me, from a place of privilege, to say, I don't want to talk about this is really dismissive for the folks who live with this every day. And the least I can do is to sit with my own discomfort to listen to their experience. And if I could go back to that group or bring them all back together, or make sure they all listen to this podcast, what I would want them all to know, the folks that felt uncomfortable, is good. Like, you need to be uncomfortable on some level to really hear this message. And it is an uncomfortable conversation, but until we accept the uncomfortableness, and we can't work on making it better for people or making it different.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, if when people brought up sort of that thin privilege, the concept of thin privilege was synonymous with thin shaming. That word shame is sticking out for me. And I'm wondering if that they're sort of shutting down. And I wonder if there's a shame element somehow, that like a very hidden shame element that's stopping any further engagement with the concept. Because there's no need, when we're talking about having thin privilege, there isn't a need for you to have personal shame. You didn't, just as much as a fat person didn't choose their own body, a thin person also didn't get to choose their own body for the most part, right? So we're not talking about you should have shame. Instead, maybe a person could ask, oh, what could I do to make things better? Maybe stop seeing a fat body as a body that needs to be fixed or changed. Or understand that person might not be doing as well in the world on many levels because they are lacking a good deal of privilege. So it's not something that should be invoking shame or used to invoke shame. It's really, like you said, it's the conversation that needs to be had around how can we help other people not suffer?
Yeah. And, regarding the whole skinny shaming thing, I just want to give a plug to Melissa Fabello. She wrote a really nice article about skinny shaming in Self Magazine that we'll include in the show notes. She just writes about like this personal experience she had with a friend with being, body shamed. And she really does a great job of explaining why skinny shaming is really different than fat shaming and fat phobia. It's still horrible, and it's not, any sort of judgment around people's bodies is bad, and especially for women, I think is very patriarchal and harmful. And I would just say, please read this article, because I think she does a very good job of explaining the differences and why we need to understand both, but that really it's the title of the article is "Skinny Shaming is Not the Same as Fat Phobia." And so I'm going to encourage all of our listeners to make sure you read that article, because she does a very good job of explaining.
I would like to draw a comparison. It's sort of like white people don't experience racism, but they can experience prejudice, right? So they can definitely experience prejudice, but racism is a systemic thing. And that's what fat phobia is as well, is systemic. This is something that a lot of people agree on, or that it's sort of happening on such a large level that just one person's action can't fix the whole thing. It takes all of our actions together. So thin shaming, it for sure happens to people, but it's not systemic, right? It's not, because most of our Western society agrees that a thinner body is the preferred body.
Yeah. And I think, what you're talking about, that systemic part of it is, just to bring some real specifics, right? We're talking about fat phobia and weight stigma that shows up in hiring practices. It shows up in medical offices. It shows up in workplaces. It shows up in education. These are systemic issues that are pervasive within our society, not just, sort of navigating, going out to lunch with someone or something like that. This is like ingrained into our system. And, real world consequences and real world biases, right? Where people are, we could probably have a whole 5-hour show on experiences of weight stigma that have shown up in this world, and maybe we need to sort of do that at some point. But just to say, it is a systemic
it won't
problem.
be 5 hours, but we could do 5 hours.
All right, 4.5.
Everybody's tapping out at hour 3. My God, they're still talking. I mean, that this is beyond some people feel bad because someone was mean to them in person. It's sort of like you said, this is showing up for health and, economic consequences. So that's where we're wanting someone to understand and take this questioning. But maybe this was good feedback for us in terms of maybe we need to just sit and talk with them about what do you feel when you see the word thin privilege? And maybe it's a group discussion.
Yeah. And maybe it's the same thing around the word fat, right? What are your feelings around the word fat? And you're right. Maybe it does need to be a group discussion and not just a lecture. It's interesting as I'm looking at more and more of the feedback. Again, there were probably I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 out of 30 comments that were sort of more negative. The other ones are very good and very positive. The other ones that sort of came back is, I think along these sort of similar lines is the presenter seemed a little biased and a little,
we're teaching you our bias.
They said pressing, like the speakers are pressing some of their own views to interns. And so, some people said it could have been more balanced or preachy. It felt a little preachy. Okay. And one of the things that I really wanted to sort of comment on here is this is a similar sort of feedback I got when, presenting a health at every size talk for a webinar for one of the practice groups in the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is this idea of, well, what's the other side of this coin? And I mean, Glenys and I, when I talk, I'm sorry, I am going to be preachy. There's science behind this, but these are my views. These are, what's wrong with that? And we do the same thing on the other side, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
the reality is, of course, everything has a bias.
yeah.
Yes, this is the philosophy we believe in, and this is the thing that we know about. We're not going to sit there and say, and then this is how you do weight loss. It's like, that's
right.
Yeah.
You get that 99% of the time. Let's spend 1% of your exposure on something radically different.
Right.
I don't need to tell you the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin.
I'm just going to say we were not preachy. We sound exactly like we do on the podcast, quite frankly. And we're just presenting information. And one thing I think we were both very careful to say is, hey, if this isn't your thing, it's okay. We did say that, So
yeah.
So I think this is what happens, and this is where we're at now in society, is that when somebody hears something, an opposing viewpoint, they automatically want to go to, that's offensive, shut it down. That's where we're at right now. And that's what that person was saying when he said,
right.
It was offensive that you said thin privilege. It's like, there could not be anything further from offensive by saying, just bringing up the concept of thin privilege, right? And not naming a person, saying, you, sir, are thin privileged, or you, madam, are thin privileged. Like, maybe that would be kind of offensive, because now you're you're bringing in the personal. That's not what you were doing. You were bringing it up as a concept.
Well, now I'm getting all riled up again, Glenys, because now I'm like this is like thin fragility, right? Do I need to like really be conscious of your thin fragility when I'm doing this? I think
it's useful to know that all humans feel fragile, and I know that that's a very popular concept as well. That there's white fragility and thin fragility. I do want to acknowledge that all people feel fragile in this world. So, but at the same time, I'm not, hitting you over the head with a cudgeon. I don't actually know what a cudgeon is, but I think that's what you.
I don't know what a cudgeon is either. I was going to ask you,
we'll look it up later, but.
Isn't that a bludgeon?
No, I'm going to bludgeon you to death, but I think there's a cudgel? Ugh, stupid. Got cudgel? Anyway. I'm not hitting you over the head with a cast iron frying pan, right? Like, I'm like, take it or leave it.
Well put. Good. Excellent analogy.
Cudgel, cudgeon. I got some learning to do later. Anyway, we just need to present you the facts. You can decide to take it or you can decide to leave it. We're cool with whatever way you go, but it's not offensive to hear views that are contrary to your own.
Yeah. Can I point out one thing? I do care where you go. Like, I do want you to, like, I don't know. I guess I'm coming at it from a perspective of and maybe this is because I live in a larger body, but like, I'm going to bring this up when I speak. Because it shows up with me in the room. And as a dietitian in a larger body, I think I have to bring it up when I speak, because it's not the norm. And so I do want you to get a little uncomfortable with it, because I think that's how we grow. And I do want you to sort of come over to my side of this, because I feel like the other way is doing harm. So I'm what I'm saying? Like, I'm a little bit more like, you got to hear this, and like, we got to do better. Because if we don't, we're doing harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I of course I want you to come over to my side, but if a person doesn't, I don't have control over that, and I've worked on letting that go, right? I can't be angry at every person that doesn't agree. And, I think about when I first heard about thin privilege, or that concept, and health at every size. And I'll tell you, if I'd only heard about it one time in the dieting mindset I was in, I absolutely would have rejected it outright. And it was only because I was in a class for 4 months with a teacher who believed in this that it really started to sink in. And then it sort of synced up with my own experiences of feeling very sad and hungry in general. And also understanding that it was a relief to understand that it wasn't my fault for having been fat, that I wasn't to blame for all the all the lack of privilege that I felt I had when I was in a larger size body. So that was actually really, but it took a long time for that to sink in. So it is hard when we have like an hour and a half for this message. And what I'm hoping is that we've planted seeds and that they'll go out in the world and their experiences will sort of coalesce with what they've heard. And they'll go, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, I think from my standpoint, I've said all I need to say about this. I think
you get it off your chest.
There's a lot of, I did, and I still might go live when we post this, right? To get people, to hear their reactions, maybe in real time if they wanted to talk about it. But still, no, I think this is, I think it's an important conversation. I'm more thankful that you were doing this with me. I think if I was alone, it would have been, the feedback might have been much harder. And I also am thankful that we can talk about it. I think what makes each of us sort of stand out, or not stand out, but like authentic in what we do, is that we can share these experiences with people to know, what it's like even behind the scenes and what it's like to do this work on a personal level, but also for other folks. So I'm thankful that we could do all of this processing about it together.
Yes, me too. I think if it had been me alone, I would have been slightly crushed. Although my favorite comment was the person who said, I'd like to hear more about intuitive eating, but from different speakers. I was like, ouch. Also, screw you. I decided not to take all of that to heart, but I do want to think about how to change this presentation to be more impactful around that. And it's interesting because every year we talk about in this presentation how weight loss doesn't work, and we show evidence and all of that, and they either say like, we already know all that, and I'm like, yeah, but you're still going to go on to do weight loss. I don't understand why you're saying all this, that dieting and weight loss doesn't seem to work long term, but every year, lots of weight loss dietitians are out there in the world. So don't tell me you really don't. You already know this information. I didn't know it, when I first learned it. So, and they don't teach that in our DPD for becoming a dietitian in school. So I don't believe that you actually do know this information, and you do need to know it. But we do need to spend some time, I think, on the thin privilege part of it and just say, like, what comes up for you, And so in some ways it was useful, I suppose. Hate to admit that.
Absolutely. Listen, I think it was totally helpful. All right. Well, Glenys, I'm always thankful we get to talk about these things. And this is another good, hopefully the listeners enjoyed it. If you didn't, don't tell us, just kidding.
We have podcast fragility.
Major. No, but we'd love to hear your comments either way. So, and hopefully you did enjoy this conversation. Glenys, anything you want to plug before we wrap up today?
We are coming towards the end of our diabetes, our health at every size for diabetes concerns group that I do with Rebecca Scritchfield. We will be running another one sometime in the spring. Not sure of the exact dates and times, but there's going to be a link in the show notes. Make sure you just sign up for our wait list so that you'll get notified first when we're going to run it again. And that's it for me. How about you?
By the time this is released, I'll have one more speaking engagement. That's at Meta in Boston. So be sure and stick around. I'll be the closing keynote for their conference. That's in middle of April. And I'll be doing another men's body trust group shortly also. It'll probably be starting sometime in May. So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome. Well, we will chat again soon.
All right. Thanks, Glenys. And thanks everyone for listening.